All right, we're live. We're gonna get started just a little bit early today. That's okay. I haven't been live streaming for 3 weeks. I think it's been. It's been a few weeks either way. A lot of stuff going on, especially with some of the videos that we've done recently. Let's start with the Idaho 4 video. So that one was pretty huge. 1,300 views so far. That was insanity. I wasn't expecting that. And I know we're a small channel and we're trying to grow and we'll get there, right? So we might look back on this in a couple of years and say 1,300, that's not a lot, but for a small channel, that seems to be a lot. And it's definitely our biggest video for the channel so far. The next biggest would have been the Anna Walsh video at 400, and then some of our live streams at about 100 views. So there's a lot of that stuff going on. So I want to start there with thank you. We're coming up on 100 subscriptions, which is hot. It'll be I would say probably in the next couple of weeks, if not sooner. We're 21 away. We just hit 79 today, and we're making a lot of progress there. So I'm really appreciating everybody that's helping the growth of the channel. Been working a lot lately and been doing a lot of traveling for work. So I haven't been able to live stream as much as I wanted to, but now we're starting to get a little bit more consistent with our schedules. So I'll try to bring the live streams every week, and I'm going to try to do them on Friday afternoons, 3, 4, 5 o'clock, depending on what time I work. I don't always get off early. I still got some work to do today, but I can do it after the live stream. I thought I would try 3 o'clock, see what that looks like, especially after all the driving I did this week. So that's where we're at. As for the live stream today, I queued up a few things. Just like it says, we are going to focus on a couple of different areas. We're going to start with the Alex Murdaugh trials, and I do have a video out on that. And then we're going to come back and talk about the Idaho 4. And I'm going to just zone in on some of the conspiracy theories with that and then some of the information that we brought up. So we'll only spend a minute or two on that. When I say a minute or two, that means usually 15, 20, but we're going to say a minute or two and then spend the most of our time on the Alex Murdaugh case. We'll talk a little bit about the timeline with that, and then the question that I have for you folks is pretty unequivocal. It's, do we think that Alex Murdaugh is guilty? That's it. That's the question. Do we think that Alex Murdaugh is guilty? And the reason why I bring that up is, I don't know about you, but I feel like we're kind of missing on some of the Alex Murdaugh stuff. I think that the prosecution is not really doing a great job. And I watched some of that trial the last couple of days and had even watched parts of it today when I was driving. I shouldn't say I listened to parts of it today when I was driving, going out to my store and back. I had about a 2-hour turnaround time. It's probably about an hour and a half, so I got to listen to it. And I'll say Alex Murdaugh, obviously he's an attorney. Obviously he's done a lot of civil suits, and he knows how to talk attorney lingo and know how to maintain his cool. I will say he answered the questions very well. And some of the stuff that I was seeing out in the blogs and even on YouTube was that, he seemed and appeared to be guilty. But I'll remind you, there's 12 jurors. You really only have to convince one, right? To really get to reasonable doubt, or essentially that'd be a hung jury at that point. But it's up to the prosecution to take all reasonable doubt away. And I'm not sure that the prosecutor has done that in this case. Now, if you look at all of the evidence and you look at my video, everything points towards Alex Murdaugh, no question, right? But all of it is circumstantial. And I bring that up because Idaho 4 is the same way. It's a lot of circumstantial evidence. And sometimes that circumstantial evidence, although it might seem like it's a lot, when you start spreading that out over days and over multiple different conversations, what does that look like for a jury? And then you got to think of jurors that are on the panel that may have had some of these situations happen. Not all of them, but like some coincidental situations. It starts to become a little harder to prove utilizing circumstantial evidence. Now, there is some things that I'll point out, and then we'll get into the timeline. I'll actually pull up what I have on the browsers. But the first thing that I think from the Alex Murdaugh trials are when they're talking technology and talking through all the data points that are given. I think that Alex Murdaugh answers these very well, right? He doesn't dispute them. He just says, if that's what the data says, then I don't dispute that. And I think that's a good answer. And I think he follows that up very much with, if you heard the expert witness, then you know that these data points aren't always correct, right? And same with the times. Sometimes the times could be off. And then he makes a good point, especially when he says Paul. He says, I think Paul was home earlier than the 7:04 time frame. And I don't know why the phone would have got pinged at 7:04, but I believe that he was at home by 7 or just before 7. And I thought this was pretty interesting because that little nuance right there, if the jury is paying attention and taking notes, that to me was a big win for the defense and a big loss for the prosecution, because the prosecution didn't come back and rebut that in any form or fashion. They basically wanted to move on to the next question. For me, that basically, Alex Murdaugh was able to put some doubt into me as a viewer to say, hey, look, maybe that piece of the evidence doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or maybe, the steps that we're talking about doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And Alex Murdaugh never gets super defensive on this stuff. He just corrects a lot. And now, obviously, he's very well versed, and I do think that the evidence still points his way. But in that case, in that scenario, it was really weird, because if you look at it holistically, that is a piece of evidence that the prosecution is really trying to hit on and really trying to use as factual. And Alex Murdaugh just tore it apart with just that one question. Now, I think another piece to that I think the prosecution was really trying to hit home was how many steps he took before he went over to his mom's place to check on her. And I think the step count was 263, and we'll take a look at it on the timeline, so don't quote me on that. But basically, the prosecution is just hammering this, basically like, why did you take 263 steps before you decided to go to your mom's house? Did you go to the bathroom? Did you get ready? You previously said you had already gotten ready and already had taken a shower, and now you were laying on the couch, maybe taking a nap. Why did it take 263 steps, right? And for anybody that tracks steps, that 263 steps is actually not a lot. And he also admits to being on the phone with somebody during that time. Now, if you're like me and you're on the phone, you may move around a lot. I cannot sit still and be on the phone. It's hard enough for me to sit down here and talk to you folks without getting up and walking around. Now, if you're going to walk 5 miles, essentially, right, you're going to walk 10,000 steps. And that's what I usually set my daily goal to. So when I look at 263, man, that'd only take a couple minutes. And that'd be a couple of trips around the kitchen into the living room and back, maybe to the bedroom. Maybe I'm grabbing a jacket. Maybe I grabbed something to drink. Then I went to the bathroom, then came back, put my shoes on, whatever the case might be. I don't think that 263 steps really proved anything. And I think that the prosecution spent a lot of time focusing on that and was really trying to berate Alex Murdaugh on that specific timing and steps that were taken. Now, in my opinion, no matter what happens, it happened at the house. So yeah, maybe he went to the gun room, and he actually brought that up. He said, maybe I stopped in the gun room. Maybe he did. Maybe he was cleaning himself up, whatever the case might be. That could be factual, right? And we just don't know that. But I think the way that the prosecutor attacked it just wasn't very strategic. I think that what he needed to do in this case was go back and kind of work backwards. And instead of telling Alex Murdaugh, you took 263 steps and you must explain the 263 steps, I think he should have worked backwards and just said, hey, I understand this is very much so a tough case for you, right? Your wife and your son was murdered, and we're trying to get to the bottom of this. Would you agree? Yes. Okay. So we're in alignment in that. Now, there's some things that point your way, and we both want to get to the same result. So if we're doing that, let's just talk a little bit about where your whereabouts were, and let's talk about the night that everything happened. And I really want to be specific, and let's focus on this time frame. So do you have any recollection of what happened during this time frame? What did you do? Did you make any phone calls? Did you get up? And then let Alex Murdaugh do the talking, right? The more the prosecutor talks, the less chance that Alex Murdaugh can back himself into a corner. And we saw that time and time again with his prosecutor asking question upon question without letting Alex Murdaugh answer those questions. Now, I said it before, I think that the evidence does point towards Alex Murdaugh, no question. I think that Alex Murdaugh, and this is just my personal opinion, has been fortunate and been given wealth and power over time. Obviously, if you look at the family history, and not only from a court perspective, but even a financial perspective, I think that there's a huge case against him with fraud, and we're seeing that play out in the courts. Now, keep in mind, he hasn't been he hasn't been convicted of that, or at least later on it's a little murky, so I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go down that rabbit trail just yet. But either way, I think the prosecutor kind of fumbled up a little bit today, and I think that it could be tough to prosecute Alex Murdaugh. I think that a lot of conspiracy theorists out there are saying that he is innocent and something might have happened. And we're going to talk timeline in a second. And I don't want to sway your opinion one way or another. I would like to hear from you, though. I want to hear, do you think that Alex Murdaugh is guilty? And if so, why? Why is he guilty? And then if you think that he's not guilty, why? Why do you think that he's not guilty? I would be interested in seeing some of the comments and kind of trying to understand, how people see things differently. I think that helps me grow as a channel and even as a narrator. But it also adds to the entertainment value because I don't always get it right. And I look at things very matter of fact for the most part. So some interesting things there. So on that note, we are going to pull up some more factual things, use some timelines. We'll add some opinion into it as well. So let me do a quick transition here. I did cue this up before, obviously, and if you've watched my video, you've seen some of this timeline already. So I won't berate it too much, right? I want to make sure that at the end of the day, you folks are getting the information. You don't have to go line by line. But I think there is some things that we want to hit high level for you folks just to kind of get some perspective of what's going on with this case. So first and foremost, right, you see right here, 1920 to 2005. For 3 generations, member of the Murdaugh family serves as South Carolina 14th Circuit Solicitor, the top prosecutor representing Beaufort, Jasper, Hampton, Allendale, and Colleton counties. So if that tells you anything on the power, the wealth that they had, and you could even say fame, because they have been touted as the most powerful family in South Carolina. So I would say fame is a part of that, and maybe not in the traditional sense of Hollywood fame, but definitely for South Carolina, and especially for the courts and authorities. This is going to be pretty famous, right? So let's look at July 8th, 2015, and I think this is where the Alex Murdaugh cases really should start. So Stephen Smith, 19, is found dead on Sandy Run Road in Hampton County. No arrest is made in the case. So Stephen Smith, if you watch my video and you go back, a lot more details in there, is essentially a classmate of Buster, who is another son of Alex Murdaugh. Now, we don't know a lot about the history or the friendship between Buster and Stephen, but there is a lot of conspiracy theories out there that might have tied those two together. And there was a reason why Stephen Smith was coming out to be in that specific area and was coming out to the house. Now, it was ruled an accident at first, and basically was that Stephen Smith was walking, got hit by a vehicle, and was hit by the mirror. But coroners later go on to say that it looked more intentional. Now, no arrest was made. Where it becomes weird is Alex Murdaugh and his brother end up at the crime scene, and they go, essentially within the tape. So the crime scene tape that keeps people out, they end up going back there. We don't know what happened or any of the conversations that happened, but that is definitely something that was pretty interesting, right? So nothing happens for a couple of years. Gloria Satterfield, which is essentially the housekeeper and nanny for the family, ends up dying. And it's interesting because Alex Murdaugh tells that he was responsible. And the reason he was responsible is I think it was a dog that essentially made Satterfield fall down the stairs, right? Now, Alex Murdaugh does a couple of crazy things in between, and you're not seeing that in this timeline, but basically says to the kids, her kids, that he's going to sue himself so that way they're taken care of, and that way they're going to see some money. Now, this plays a major factor into the case, too, because, I think that Alex Murdaugh was having financial troubles at this point already. Now, it's only speculation and only my opinion. Why did she die? I would say, there's a likelihood that she was probably owed some money. But again, that's my opinion. That's speculation. I haven't read that anywhere. But if you look at everything that's happened, it just feels like, the accident that happened, and it could have been because nobody was ever prosecuted for it, could have been the case. Now, where I get thrown off is that Alex Murdaugh says he's going to sue himself and make sure that these kids are going to be taken care of. And it turns out the kids never got any money anyways. And they ended up having to put their mobile home into foreclosure and didn't get any help from Alex Murdaugh through all of this, right? So that's crazy to me. If you think about it, like no help, basically says that he's going to help and sue himself so that way they're taken care of, and ends up not doing anything, okay? So I'm thinking that already there's some fraud going on with money there, but that's okay. Hear me out. On February 24th, 2019, Mallory Beach, 19, goes missing after a boat crash near Paris Island. A 911 call is placed from the scene of the crash at Archer's Creek. Okay, so why is this significant? Well, this is basically what's going to set off all these investigations that are going to come up. Now, just to talk about this case for a minute, we won't go into too much depth, but basically Paul, the son, the one that ends up being murdered later on, was the captain of this boat. Paul was also videotaped buying and purchasing alcohol on the same day and actually putting the alcohol up into the air, showing people, hey, I was lucky enough to buy this alcohol using my older brother's ID, essentially. Okay. Later on in that trip, it is stated that Paul wanted to stop at a bar, which he does. You see it on video, and nobody else wanted to stop, but he ends up coaxing his friends into coming in. And a big reason for that they say is that Paul always got his way. Now, later on, right, Paul is essentially captaining the boat, and they end up crashing, and then Mallory ends up in the water. Now, clearly she dies at that point, or dies soon afterwards, and they find her body about a week later. Now, in March 2019, the Beach family files a wrongful death lawsuit. Okay? So, it's crazy, but only name Richard Alexander Alex Murdaugh Sr., and then Richard Alexander Buster Murdaugh Jr. and Parker's convenience store. Now, basically what they're doing is they're going after Buster for his ID, going after the convenience store for selling the minors alcohol, and then also going after Alex Murdaugh Sr. because he's the one that has the money, right? Pretty crazy stuff. So, what ends up happening is you see like a big gap here, right? So Murdaugh pleads not guilty to all charges. That's Paul Murdaugh. You can click on that. It'll show you some of the court case stuff. But essentially, court-ordered mediation in the wrongful death lawsuit fails, which appears to make the case bound for trial. Okay, now what's huge about this is that this kind of sets off a trigger of events that basically has people looking into the finances of Alex Murdaugh. Okay? Now, there's stuff that's missed in here, at least on this timeline, and we might see it later on, but I'll keep hitting it. But basically, Alex Murdaugh was audited, per se, for this upcoming court, and it was noticed that money was missing, and then within his own internal law firm, they noticed that the money was missing, and then other firms were noticing that money was missing. And that day that both Paul and Maggie die was the day that, essentially Alex Murdaugh was called out from the firm for fraud, right? So there's a lot of pressure on him at this point. So let's read through this. Alex Murdaugh discovers the bodies of his son Paul and wife Maggie, and then basically makes a phone call to 911 at 10:07. Okay, you can go back and read all this. I won't go through that. But June 8th, 2021, authorities confirmed the identities of the deceased, which end up being Paul and Maggie, and then basically referred to it as a double homicide, but they think that there's no threat to the public. Now, Alex Murdaugh goes in and he does do some interrogation stuff. You can see here he's wearing different clothes. If you watch my video, I do actually put the picture of him on Instagram earlier this night, and you'll see that he is wearing different clothes. I don't know if that is evidence or not. Obviously, it's going to be brought up, and it has been brought up in court, but you're talking 10:07 p.m. Most people do change out of their work clothes at some point in the night. He calls the cops at 10:07. Would he have changed his clothes at that point? Probably would have. So for me, that is also part of circumstantial evidence. Keep in mind, he'd have been silly to, if he did commit the murders, to wear the same clothes. And I've said that before. It just is what it is. Okay. Let's keep going. So basically, this one was pretty huge too. You'll see that in my video. Alex Murdaugh's brothers, Randy and John, appear in an exclusive interview. And basically, they say that, somebody that, was going after Paul because of Mallory Beach's death. And it was an assassination. And then they put up $100,000 to essentially get any information provided back to this, right? Which was pretty interesting. Okay. Now, at this time, you do see like the Stephen Smith stuff come back into it, and they were going to open that up again. But it's weird that all of this stuff was going on. Okay. So we could go through all of this. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. I do suggest, this is a really good timeline for you if you want to go back and check it out. And there's definitely some things that I'll miss, like this right here. Fellow attorney Chris Wilson confronts Murdaugh about money. So all of that stuff is going on, okay? But I want to simplify the timeline for you for just a quick second. So think of it like this. So back in 2015, Stephen Smith dies. We don't know why. It happens close to essentially the time that Buster was home, and we don't know if Stephen Smith, if it was coincidence or if he was coming out to see Buster for some reason. There are some theories out on the internet. I'm not going to bring them up. You can go check them out. But it does seem maybe that was tied only for the reason that Alex Murdaugh and his brother ended up at the scene of the crime, or what could potentially be a crime. Okay. Then the family housekeeper ends up dying, and in a weird way, and then Alex Murdaugh says that it's his fault, but he doesn't say it's his fault like he did something. He just said that it was his fault, it happened on his grounds, whatever. Okay. And I think at that point there's already money that's going missing, and there's probably some things that are happening. He talks about an opiate addiction, and that's basically where all the money's going, and maybe that's the case, but maybe it's not. Who knows? Okay. Then you have Paul Murdaugh, who ends up, killing a young lady in Mallory Beach. And that really sets the case going, because that opens up all the litigation. And that's where the civil suit first gets filed, right? Because there was no civil suit filed for the housekeeper at that point, and there was no civil suit filed for Stephen Smith because they couldn't prove anything. So this really is the trial that's going to open it up. Now, when they pull the books back, that's when they start seeing that there's a lot of fraud going on and that Alex Murdaugh wasn't a stand-up citizen. Now, that doesn't make him a murderer in any case, but that's what really opens it up. Now, if you add some other circumstantial, opinionated evidence that I'm going to bring forward, one, was there a life insurance policy? We know that there was on two people. That could really change the course or the outcome of what that fraud case is going to look like. Yes, absolutely. And then does that solve a couple of problems for you, or at least in your own mind, does that solve some of the problems with Mallory Beach? And it's a possibility that under that much pressure that Alex Murdaugh was in that mindset. Now, we don't know that for sure. Again, you are innocent until you're proven guilty. And even in this case, I think that the prosecutor has botched the case a little bit. I am not 100% convinced that he is going to be proven guilty. The problem with that is I don't know if he's proven not guilty, if I believe that the not guilty is correct, or if the prosecution just didn't do a good job, because that happens, right? Now, keep in mind, in the court of law, a lot of times it is a duel between the prosecution and the defense, and sometimes people that are innocent end up going to jail, and sometimes people are guilty end up being free. And that's neither here nor there for me to judge, obviously, because I'm not the judge, I'm not the jury, and I'm not the executioner. But I do think the timeline looks a little fishy. The other thing that looks a little fishy is there's just too many coincidences. And I remember one of my coworkers saying about 15 years ago, if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's most likely a duck. Is there a chance that it might not be? Yeah, but it's most likely a duck. And in this case, I just think that Alex Murdaugh just doesn't look very good. I think the one thing he's got going for himself is that he did take the stand. That is very rare in murder trials to take the stand. And I think that he does a very good job of referencing back to Paul and Maggie and show in somewhat form or fashion some feelings there, right? Now, does it look like it's kind of a show? It kind of does, but I don't know how people would react in that case. I've never had to deal with that, and I hope I never do. But it would definitely be very difficult. So I think he's got that going for himself, and then I think he's got the obviously being a lawyer, he knows how to answer questions. Okay. All right, so that's it for the Alex Murdaugh case. I want to hear from you folks. I want to know if you think that if he's guilty or if he's innocent, and I want to hear why. And then any questions that you may have. Now, I obviously high level hit that. I've got a lot more details in my video, but even in that case, there's a lot of videos out there that are like an hour or 2 hours long. Like, this is just such a whack case that, oh man, it's all over the place. It is all over the place. You got to do a lot of research to really kind of understand what's going on, and then really come up with like all the craziness and the coincidences and the people. And it's just, I don't know. It's absolute insanity. I highly suggest, if you're into true crime, that you look at this. Okay, let's transition a little bit. And I said I'd be 1 or 2 minutes on the Idaho 4, which really means 15 to 20 minutes. I just wanted to give you a few updates. So first and foremost, I do appreciate the 1,300 views on the video. That's been my biggest video to date. Obviously, you're liking the content. We did almost 110 hours of watch time on that video. I am very passionate about the case, but I do got to bring something up that one of the viewers brought forward. And I'm not sure if I was nervous when I was recording the video or what had happened, but I made a pretty big mistake in that video, and that was saying Casey instead of Kaylee. Now, if you've been on my live streams time and time again, I haven't gotten that wrong in the past, and I'm not sure why I kept saying Casey. And I went back through the video, and I did it quite a few times. So first and foremost, to the person that called that out and then put it in chat, much appreciated. We definitely want to grow our channel the right way, and we want to get it right, especially in the victims' cases. We do this for entertainment and for passion, but there are real life victims in this, and it is up to us at the channel, which is essentially me, to make sure that I'm getting the names right and I'm getting the victim names right. And the reason why I didn't pull the video is that all the videos, if you go back and see any room for improvement or growth, we want other people to see that so they can see how much we're growing and how much feedback means to us and how we're taking feedback and implementing that. So we're going to continue to work on that. We're going to continue to work on the betterment of the channel. So moving into that, there were just a couple updates I wanted to give you. So this one was pretty huge for me. So police have no record of whether Brian Koberger was offered internship position months before the Idaho murders. Now, we had heard the rumor that he had applied for an internship and had went in and talked to the police. And obviously the department didn't put him on for whatever reason. This to me wasn't a big development, and I could be wrong on this. I've been wrong on this case in the past. I just think that, he was trying to do an internship, and maybe, we'll hear more about it in the case, but it just seemed like for one reason or another, it didn't work out. Could have been the police department, could have been Brian Koberger himself. But either way, we know that he doesn't spend time doing an internship there, or at least at this point, that's what the police department have hinted at, we'll say. So I thought that was pretty important. This one got me the other day. So surviving roommate thought noise from Idaho killings was partying. I did talk about this a little bit in the video, but I do want to hit this a little bit because I feel like Dylan was kind of roasted a few times online and right from the get-go, right? And I do have to say that the communication from the police department was uninspiring at best. And most of the time it was scattered. And I do understand why that is. And I do understand that they have a job to do and they want to obviously get a conviction. So I'm not roasting them in that case, but I think that for Dylan, it had to have been really tough because the narrative was, they were killed early that morning. When it first came out, it didn't really have a timeline, but later we found it was between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. And then the police weren't called till almost noon, right? So sometime after 11 a.m. Now, what we see here and what we thought initially was that, maybe the roommates didn't hear or they were on the first floor and, the perpetrator, aka who we think is the suspect in Brian Koberger, just never went down to the first floor. Then we found that Dylan was actually on the main floor or the second floor, depending on how you look at it, and that she had come out a couple of times and that she had heard something and even had thought that she had saw the killer, right? Talks about the bushy eyebrows. If you look at the police or the arrest affidavit, you show all of that stuff in there. So if you look at this, Murdaugh allegedly opened her bedroom door around 4 a.m. and yelled, "Calm down, you're being loud and I'm trying to sleep." So basically when she comes out, she's saying that, she thought that it was a party. And if you go back and you look through the police affidavit, it says that she thought she may have seen the killer, had half a mask on and bushy eyebrows and whatnot, right? And I think that it's an important detail because, obviously the cops didn't get called till the next day. Now, let's just be fair in this whole situation. Even if the cops were called that night, they weren't going to find a suspect because the suspect would have been on their way out at that point, right? Would they had a better chance of catching Brian Koberger, who they say is the suspect right now? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows, right? So there's really... that timing is not going to make a huge difference. So I think that we can remove that now and kind of look at it from Dylan's perspective that, if she thought it was partying, we know that that house has been hit a few times with noise violations and the cops had to visit and even threaten with tickets and all that stuff. So would it have been uncommon to have people come over? No. We also know that Xana was on TikTok right around the same time. We don't know what she was doing. Was she recording a video? Was she being loud? We just don't know, right? The dog upstairs, you hear that where in the police affidavit, Dylan comes out and thinks that maybe Kaylee is playing with her dog upstairs. So all of that's pretty legit. And then we're seeing now that it may have been a friend of Ethan's who came over and made that call and was just checking in on Ethan, and not for a bad reason, but was looking for him for some reason, and it ended up working that way. So I think the narrative is changing, and I think we're going to see that more in the court documents. But I think that for anybody that was trying to question what was happening with Dylan, one, she's going to be scarred and devastated for life at this point for a couple of different reasons. Obviously she lost 4 of her friends. And then the other piece of it is that she was that close that she could have been next. Not only is she going to have survivor's guilt, but she's going to think of the whys and what ifs. And if there's anything that can really get into the mind of somebody, it's really thinking about those what ifs. And I think that's going to happen in this case. So for Dylan, we feel bad for Dylan. And I'm glad that some of the narrative that's coming out and some of the stuff that we're seeing is showing, the exact reasons why the cops weren't called until 11:30 and what was going on through Dylan's head during that time, right? So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the last thing I wanted to hit on the Idaho 4 is obviously the conspiracy theory around Brent Kopaka. Now, I'm seeing a lot of videos on this. I'm seeing a lot of news around this, and I don't have feelings one way or another. I just want to hit a couple of things on this, and then I open it up to you folks. What do you think? Do you think that this is legit? Do you think that Kopaka had something to do with it? Basically, some of the theories are that he was the one that gave the knife to Bryan Kohberger. Some of the timing is very convenient with what happened to him. And I'm just going to read this first part out, and I'll tell you what some of the conspiracies are, and then I'll tell you what I think. But the arrest of 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger for the murders of the 4 University of Idaho students has led to web sleuths generating a number of wild theories regarding the stabbings as well as the suspect. The latest point of contention among these online sleuths seemed to be the possible connection between Kohberger and Brent Kopaka, a U.S. Army veteran who was fatally shot by a SWAT officer during a standoff near the Washington University campus. Now, there's a couple of things that happen here that I think that you could look at. Yeah, one, is he in the military? Yeah, that doesn't really mean anything. There's a lot of people that have been in the military, but because of the K-bar knife, people are saying that might be a tie, and maybe Kopaka gave the knife to Bryan Kohberger. And then the other piece of it is the standoff with SWAT. Why was he in a standoff with SWAT and essentially looked like he wanted to be taken out by them, or whatever the case might be? This is from the online community, and not all online communities, just some of the conspiracy theories where they tied back to it. Now, if you see right here, it talks about Kohberger and his father were pulled over on the same day, and I think that it's pretty interesting for me. I think that for me, I don't think that these folks were tied in any way, and maybe they were, and maybe I will have to eat crow on that, and I gladly will if that's the case. I've done that with the Elantra, which I didn't think played a major factor in this case. Clearly it did, and I was wrong, and I said I was wrong, and I will continue to say that I'm wrong on that. For this one, I just don't know if Kohberger and Kopaka were related in it, and I think that this is going to bring up some interesting things in the case, especially if they find any evidence that could tie Kopaka back to it, right? The one thing that throws me off is that right now you're seeing that Kohberger did do a lot of following and a lot of likes on Instagram with Maddie. Now, he did do a little bit with Kaylee, but what it appears is that he had liked every picture of Maddie's, and that's what the narrative. Now, keep in mind, I will say it again, unless it's stated in court and it comes forward as a piece of evidence, that is just opinion, and that's an opinion that I'm getting from different news sources that I cannot verify, but that's what's out there right now. Now, do I believe that or not believe that? Do I think it's possible? Absolutely, I do. And if it ends up being Bryan Kohberger, then we know that it's probably Maddie that he was targeting, right? And that's a very real possibility, right? We don't know what's in the mind of a serial killer and or why they would do that. But it's a very interesting thing to me because the timing of it, the location of Brent Kopaka, the military background, I could see how some of the conspiracies come forward with that. I just don't know that, obviously the police chased this down and were looking at all of this stuff, and they never mentioned Brent Kopaka. So there's got to be other stuff that was going on with that gentleman. I haven't done a lot of research into it. So, for me, I don't want to speculate any more than I have, because I have done a lot of speculation on this video and a lot of opinion. And I try to keep it to facts. Obviously, that's not the case today, but I just think that we just need to focus on what the case is going to be, and really just keep the 4 victims near and dear to our heart, and just pray for the survivors, right? Like Dylan. There's families out there, there's friends, there's siblings, that they'll get some closure of all of this. And I said it in a live stream a few live streams ago, it'd be nice if it is Brian Kohberger, that he would just come out and say why and give the family closure, right? If it's not Brian Kohberger, then whoever they find that becomes the new suspect or goes to court, that they come forward and say why it happened, just to give the family closure. So on that note, it's been about 45 minutes. That's about the length of my live stream. I will have some videos coming up. I changed my cadence to Wednesdays only for videos. Again, I do appreciate all the support on that. And then I will try to bring Friday night streams. I'm going to try to get more consistent with that. Not making any promises. It's just all based off of work. Again, I don't get paid to do this. I really like to do it for a passion project, and it's something that I want to continue to grow. So I do appreciate everybody that's supporting the channel. You mean more than you could ever imagine, right? Because you're helping it grow. And I will tell you, the comments that I get and some of the private messages that I get from the viewers that are coming in on this are nothing short of just absolutely inspiring and motivating. And even the ones that have like a lot of feedback or a lot of recommendations, I really do appreciate that, because you're taking time not only to listen to some of the stuff that I'm bringing forward, but to really provide a good feedback on it. And nobody's been negative, right? Like, obviously, there's been things that needed to be changed, and I appreciate that, but nobody's been negative in a sense that's been condescending or anything like that, and I got to appreciate that. We've got a good community going, and I thank you folks for that. So on that note, I'm going to wish everybody a great weekend. I will bring you another video sometime next week, Wednesday, 9 a.m., turn your alerts on for that. And then we will do some updates next Friday. If there's something or a case you would like me to cover, just send me a message, either live stream or video. I'd love to do it. And I just need a couple of days to be able to do research and let some things sink in, and then watch some of the case if it is in trial. So on that note, have a great weekend. And I hope everybody has a lot of fun. Talk to y'all later.